Hi, everybody, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking, a podcast of the friends and faculty of Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. My name is David Capes, and I am the Senior Research Fellow at the Lanier Theological Library and a former dean up there in Wheaton at the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. Our purpose in these podcasts is really very simple. We want to promote the study of biblical languages, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, so we can read the Bible more faithfully, study it more fully, and not just read it, but to live it. Joining me today on Exegetically Speaking is Dr. Doug Penney. His title is Associate Professor of Classical Languages here at Wheaton College. Dr. Penney, thanks for being with us again.
Thank you.
Last time we were here, we were talking about Tobit and Aesop's fables and reading outside the canon. But today we're going to be kind of inside the canon reading. But in particular, we're going to be talking about Beelzebub, or is it Beelzebul? Which one is it?
I think it's probably Beelzebub, and I hope I can explain why the gospel uses a different form of it.
Okay. So what's the etymology? What's the background behind this text?
Well, there's a good etymology for Beelzebub. It's a little harder to explain Beelzebul. Let me begin with a story from our own English heritage that might throw some light on that. We have an expression in English, speak of the devil, and we usually use it when someone wanders into the room after we have mentioned that person's name. And this reflects the fear that naming the devil will summon him. The whole expression is speak of the devil and he will appear. And I suspect that in the gospel times, they were using a corrupted form of Beelzebub so that they would avoid summoning the devil. When Jerome translates the Bible into Latin, he uses the form Beelzebub and restores what I think is the original form of it. The reason that's more persuasive is that there's a good Semitic etymology for the form Beelzebub. If you turn in Hebrew, I don't know if you can do that, to Genesis 37, verse 2.
Genesis, okay.
There's a story about Joseph bringing a bad report, a slanderous report back to his father about his brothers. And the Hebrew word there is the root dalet beit. This is cognate with Akkadian and Aramaic davav, and it means speech. So the Beelzebub, the owner of a speech, is a legal term in Akkadian and Christian Palestinian Aramaic, which is the Aramaic used in Palestine during the time of the Gospels, that identifies the complaining witness or the accuser in court, the person who has brought the accusation against you. So the Aramaic phrase Beelzebub is your accuser. And the other names for the devil have basically the same meaning. The accuser of the brethren, hokategoron, hodiabolos, the Greek translation of Satan, also means the slanderer. And so if we believe that Beelzebub is the original form, it fits in with the terminology already being used of the devil, and it has a very good Semitic etymology, as opposed to Beelzebul, which can plausibly be suggested to be a corruption of the name to avoid summoning the devil.
So it seems like a logical thing to do, right?
Well, it fits how people think and act.
Yeah.
And the beauty of this is it helps us realize why it's important that Parakletos identifies Jesus as our advocate in heaven, because you already have an accuser. You need an advocate before God. Mm-hmm. And it almost takes you back to the scenario at the opening of the book of Job, where there's a great committee meeting in heaven with God and his advisors.
Right.
And Satan shows up, which is a bit of a shock. And God and he have this little repartee in which he accuses Job, and then God gives him permission to make Job's life hard.
So I like the idea of bringing a bad report, kind of going back to that. I mean, the idea the owner of the bad report or the owner of the accusation as a legal term. That's fascinating. I haven't heard that before. So when you talk about the other names, diabolos, slanderer, hasatan.
Diabolos is certainly a legal term. Plato uses it in his Apology. I mean, it's what his accusers are doing for him, against him.
So let me just read a text from the New Testament here and give me your sense now of how you would interpret that text, where the Pharisees hear what Jesus is up to, and they said, it is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this man casts out demons. Is this a reference now to what we would call the devil, the accuser at this point?
Well, that's a very complicated question.
Sure.
Because there are so many names for the devil, and there's so much intrigue with regard to who's at the top of the power pyramid.
Right.
In the spiritual warfare on the dark side.
Yeah.
That verse or that quote, it's 3 times in the Gospels. It's in Matthew 12 and Mark 3 and Luke 11, always told almost with the same words. I think, Jesus sort of dismantles their accusations, says
Sure.
that's not going to work
Right.
that way.
He takes it apart, doesn't he?
But it reflects the assumption that the angelic armies and the devil's armies are hierarchies, and the higher up you're plugged in, the more command you have of the underlings. And of course, Jesus, the thing that people know about him is that he's an incredibly powerful exorcist. He deals with all the problems that they attribute to demons in ways that the Pharisees themselves cannot. And we know that the Pharisees had their own school of exorcism. Jesus says, by whom do your sons cast out demons?
Right. Apparently with some success, I
Right.
guess, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it, right?
The other thing that may relate to this that's really quite interesting is that we often are told that someone greater than Solomon is here, or could this be the son of David in reference to Jesus? And we always think it's a messianic idea that
Right.
they're talking about. I want to suggest that given the fame of Solomon as an exorcist, that they may be identifying Jesus as more powerful than Solomon in terms of having power over the dark forces that influence their world.
And so that may be some kind of background to what's being said here.
Yeah, and because most of us are unaware of this element of Palestinian history and mythology, we don't bring it into our understanding of the text. We tend to go back to what's mentioned in the Old Testament and assume that's what they're referring to.
Well, I often heard that Beelzebub referred to the Lord of the Flies.
There is that connection with
and
the
you're going to hear
passage
that in some places.
in Kings. That's Gaster, Theodore Gaster, in his Myth, Legend, and Custom in the Old Testament addresses that, and it's not an easy connection to make. Were there oracles based on the movement of flies at Ekron? I mean, what's the praxis that's involved, and is that really a good source for the name of the chief of demons? And I think the legal terminology and the accuser motif is probably a much more plausible connection.
Yeah.
And it's really quite well established in the Jewish Palestinian Aramaic literature.
Well, that's a very helpful insight that you brought today. Dr. Doug Penney, thanks for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking.
You're welcome.
Thanks to Ian Rosine, Rebecca Larson, and Silvio Vasquez, who helped us produce this podcast. Thanks as well to John Lansma, our Wheaton-based director, who makes this podcast possible. We're grateful to Phil Keggy for our music. If you want to study biblical languages, then you need to consider Wheaton College. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, we have amazing programs, a first-rate faculty, and some of the best students in the world. So go to the website, www.wheaton.edu, and look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. If you have questions about this or any of our podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions or questions about any passage in the Hebrew Bible or Greek New Testament, send us an email and we'll see if we can get one of our experts to weigh in on that for you. Our email is exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for listening.